Lucas Hayes stood in the hallway of the Terran Federation Embassy on Zephyria Prime, his white cane tapping softly against the polished floor. He could feel the cool air from the ventilation system and hear the faint hum of advanced technology running through the walls. The Zephyrians liked their machines to be efficient and quiet, which made everything harder for him. A blind man's world was built on sound and vibration, on the soft noises that told him where things were. Here, everything was designed to be silent and smooth. Ambassador David Fisher approached Lucas, his footsteps heavy with worry. Lucas heard him coming from 50 feet away. That was one advantage of his condition. He noticed things others missed. The ambassador was troubled, nervous, and probably had not slept well. "Lucas, we need to talk about the proposal," Fisher said, stopping just a few feet away. Lucas turned his head toward the sound of the ambassador's voice. "They rejected the trade agreement again." "No, it's something different. Something that could solve all our problems or destroy us completely." Lucas listened as Fisher explained the situation. The Terran Federation was under pressure from hostile forces gathering in the outer regions of the galaxy. The Zephyrians controlled the largest military force in this sector. They could be the perfect ally, but the two civilizations did not trust each other. Humans were seen as primitive beings from a harsh world, people who relied on simple weapons and basic technology. The Zephyrians, who had mastered light-based systems and advanced visual technologies, looked down on humans as inferior. "The Zephyrian High Council has made a proposal," Fisher continued. "They want to bind our two civilizations together through a marriage alliance. A human marrying a member of the Zephyrian royal family." Lucas felt his stomach tighten. He had heard of such things before. Political marriages that meant nothing to the people involved, just contracts written in words and law. "They chose you, Lucas," Fisher said quietly. "Why me?" Lucas asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Because you are blind. It makes you less threatening to them. They believe your condition makes you weak, incapable of being a military threat. And they have chosen Princess Kaelara as your bride." Lucas had heard the name before. The Zephyrian princess was known throughout the embassy staff as cold, logical, and completely dismissive of human culture. She was the heir to the throne, a warrior trained in both politics and combat. Pairing her with a blind human would seem like an insult to her, which was probably exactly what the Zephyrian High Council intended. "If I refuse?" Lucas asked. Fisher was quiet for a long moment. "Then Earth loses its best chance at protection. The Zephyrians will turn their attention elsewhere, and we will be alone when the threats come." Lucas lifted his cane and pointed it at the ambassador. "So I marry a woman who despises me to save a planet that pities me. That is the offer." "Yes," Fisher said. "That is the offer. But Lucas, I know you. You have always been more than what people expect of you. Maybe you can find a way to make this work." The wedding happened 3 days later in the Great Hall of Unity. The Zephyrians loved ceremony and tradition, and this ceremony was designed to bind two worlds together. Lucas felt the space around him, the vastness of the hall, the presence of thousands of people. He heard the strange songs of the Zephyrians, notes that seemed to blend light and sound in ways he did not fully understand. Princess Kaelara stood beside him. He could feel her presence, the way her breathing was controlled and perfect, the way she held her body with military precision. She said nothing to him during the ceremony, not a single word. She was as far from him emotionally as the Zephyrians had probably hoped. When the ceremony ended, guards led Lucas through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The acoustics changed as they moved, telling him they were passing through different sections of the palace. Finally, they entered a large chamber, the royal bedchamber, he assumed. "You are dismissed," Kaelara said coldly to the guards. Her voice was sharp and carried no warmth. It was the voice of someone giving orders to soldiers, not speaking to a husband. The guards left. The door sealed shut with a heavy sound that echoed through the room. "I know you cannot see," Kalara said, and there was something like mockery in her tone. "I find it fitting that your marriage begins in darkness. This is what humanity deserves, to stumble through life blind and helpless, unable to understand the world as it truly is." Lucas stood still, his cane held steady in his hand. He did not respond with anger. He had learned long ago that anger only came from expecting others to understand, and most people never would. "There is a chair 4 steps to your left," Kalara said. "There is a table 6 steps forward with water and food. The bed is to your right. I suggest you locate these things before you hurt yourself." She walked away from him. He heard her footsteps moving across the chamber, heard a door open, and then heard silence. She had left him alone in the dark, believing that darkness was his enemy, not understanding that it was his home. Lucas took a step forward and began to tap his cane. The sound bounced back to him, painting a picture of the room in his mind. The chair was exactly where she said it was. The table was exactly where she said it was. Every obstacle she had positioned with obvious intention to mock him was a simple problem to solve. He found the water, drank it slowly, and then found the bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But for tonight, Lucas Hayes, the blind human who had married a Zephyrian princess to save his planet, would sleep knowing that the darkness that frightened her was the very thing that made him stronger than she could possibly imagine. The next morning, Lucas woke to find the royal chamber filled with light. Even though he could not see it, he could feel the warmth on his face. The Zephyrians had designed their palace with massive windows and light-based systems that turned their world into something that mimicked their own visual nature. Princess Kalara stood by the window, watching the strange purple sun rise over the Zephyrian capital. She did not acknowledge his presence. She never did in the mornings. She would leave, spend her day in meetings and military training, and return in the evening with new tests designed to humiliate him. Over the first week, she set traps. Small things meant to make him stumble. She placed obstacles in unexpected places, rearranged furniture, and created situations where his blindness would seem like a disadvantage. Lucas moved through each day without complaint. He navigated the chaos with perfect grace, never falling, never stumbling, never showing frustration. On the 8th night, Kalara came to him as he sat in the darkness of their chamber. "How do you do this?" she demanded. "Do what?" Lucas asked. "Move. Function. How do you not hurt yourself when you cannot see anything?" Lucas turned toward her voice. "The world is more than just what your eyes tell you, princess. Humans came from a harsh planet where the sun burns and the predators hunt in darkness. We learn to feel the world around us. We learn to listen. We learn to sense things before we could see them." "That is not possible," Kalara said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. "Walk with me," Lucas said. He stood and extended his hand toward where he calculated she would be standing. There was a long pause. Then he felt her hand grip his. Her palm was warm and slightly damp, a sign that touching him made her nervous. Lucas walked her through the dark chamber slowly. He described what he felt. The way the air temperature changed near the windows. The subtle vibrations in the floor that told him about the palace's machinery running beneath them. The soft sounds of guards moving outside, of other people living their lives in the parts of the palace he could never see, but could always know were there. "You are aware of things I never notice," Kalara said quietly, "because you have always relied on your eyes. If you lost them tomorrow, you would be helpless. But if I could suddenly see, I would be the helpless one. Humans have learned to live with less, and that has made us strong in ways you cannot measure." Over the next few weeks, something changed between them. Kalara stopped setting traps. Instead, She began to ask him questions. She wanted to understand how he sensed time. She wanted to know how he knew when she was upset. She watched as he detected the subtle change in her heartbeat when she was worried. The way her breathing became tighter when she was angry. "You can feel my emotions through the air," she said one evening. Amazed. "Not the air," Lucas corrected. "I listen to you. Truly listen. Most people hear, but they never listen. They are too focused on what they see to notice what they hear." Then, 3 weeks into their marriage, everything changed. It was late at night. Lucas was sitting on the balcony of their chamber, feeling the cool night air and listening to the sounds of the palace, settling into sleep. Kaelara was somewhere in the chamber behind him, asleep in their bed. He heard something else, a sound that did not belong. It was soft, barely audible, but it was there. The sound of something moving against the wall, of machinery being activated in a way it should not be. Lucas stood quickly. He moved back into the chamber and reached out, finding Kaelara's shoulder. "Wake up," he said urgently. "Something is wrong." Kaelara gasped and sat up. "What? What is it?" "There is someone in the chamber with us. Do not turn on the lights." "How can you possibly?" But there was no time for explanations. A figure moved through the darkness, activating a light-based cloaking device that should have made them invisible to normal sight. But Lucas did not rely on sight. He heard the whisper of the device activating. He heard the assassins' breathing change as they prepared to strike. Lucas turned his body and pushed Kaelara away from where the attack would come. A blade meant for her struck him instead, cutting deeply into his shoulder. The pain was immediate and sharp, but Lucas did not cry out. Instead, he swung his cane in a wide arc, using the sound of the air to find the assassin's location. The cane connected. The attacker stumbled, and in that moment of confusion, alarms began to sound throughout the palace. Guards burst through the doors. The assassin tried to flee, but was caught before they could reach the window. Kaelara stood in shock, watching as medical teams rushed in and began treating Lucas's wound. She watched as he refused pain medication, insisting on staying alert, even as blood soaked through the bandages they wrapped around his shoulder. "Why did you not allow them to sedate you?" she asked, her voice strange and soft. "Because you are in danger," Lucas said simply. "I need to stay awake to protect you." Kaelara was quiet for a very long time. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed completely. It was no longer the cold, dismissive voice of a princess who despised a weak human. It was the voice of someone who had just seen true strength for the first time in her life. "Thank you," she whispered. And that night, for the first time, she stayed beside him as he slept, making sure his wound did not bleed through the bandages. She listened to his breathing and realized that this blind human, this man from the harsh planet Earth, had a kind of sight that her entire civilization had forgotten how to understand. He saw danger through sound. He saw her emotions through attention. He saw the world through senses the Zephyrians had abandoned generations ago. By the time the morning came, Princess Kaelara had begun to understand that marrying Lucas Hayes was not a punishment. It was the greatest gift the universe could have given her. 2 weeks after the assassination attempt, Emperor Varesh requested a private meeting with Lucas. This surprised everyone. The Emperor had not attended the wedding ceremony. He had not made any public statement about the marriage. His silence had been pointed and obvious, a sign that he did not approve of the human who had married his daughter. Guards escorted Lucas through the palace to the Emperor's private chambers. The walk took a long time, through corridors that seemed designed to disorient anyone who could not see. But Lucas felt the subtle changes in the air, the patterns of the palace, and he arrived calm and centered. Emperor Varesh sat in a large chair in a room filled with soft light. Lucas sensed the vastness of the space, the careful positioning of everything around him. The emperor was a powerful man, someone accustomed to controlling every detail of his environment. "Sit," the emperor commanded. Lucas found the chair across from the emperor and sat down. He waited silently, knowing that the emperor would speak when he was ready. "My daughter tells me that you protected her," Varesh said finally. "That you sensed danger in complete darkness and saved her life." "Yes, your majesty," Lucas said. "How?" Lucas chose his words carefully. "A human learns to listen to the world in ways that your people have forgotten. On Earth, we have predators and threats in every darkness. We have learned to survive by using all of our senses, not just our eyes." The emperor was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, less commanding, more vulnerable. "I am losing my sight, human, slowly. Day by day, my vision becomes worse. The palace physicians tell me it is a genetic condition that has infected the royal bloodline. They say there is no cure. They tell me I must hide this from the public, that if the people learned their emperor was going blind, they would lose faith in the government." Lucas felt something shift in the room. The emperor had just shared a secret that could destroy his power if it became known. "But I wonder," Varesh continued, "how a man can lead a civilization when his eyes are failing him. How can I make decisions about a world I can barely see anymore?" "Your Majesty," Lucas said carefully, "I have been blind since childhood. I lost my sight in an accident on Earth, and I thought my life had ended. I believed I would never be useful, never be strong, never matter. But I was wrong. My blindness taught me to see in ways that sighted people never can. What you fear losing is not what makes you a good leader. It is your judgment, your wisdom, your ability to understand your people. These things do not require eyes." The emperor leaned forward. Show me how you live without sight. Teach me how to survive what is coming." Over the next month, Lucas spent hours with the emperor. He taught him how to navigate darkness without relying on technology. He showed him how to listen to his guards and advisors in ways that visual cues had always distracted him from. He demonstrated how to feel the palace beneath his feet, how to understand the world through touch and sound and instinct. Kalara noticed the change in her father immediately. He seemed more present, less desperate, more confident about his future. She watched as Lucas and her father developed a relationship based on genuine understanding, rather than duty and protocol. But not everyone in the Zephyrian court was pleased with the change. A faction of nobles and military leaders began to view Lucas as a threat. They whispered that he was manipulating the emperor, that he was weakening the empire with his human ideas. They argued that the Zephyrian civilization had built its power on visual technology and military strength, and turning to a blind human for guidance would destroy everything they had achieved. The opposition came to a head during a formal state dinner. The emperor had announced that he wanted to fund research into human sensory techniques, that he wanted to integrate human adaptability into Zephyrian military strategy. Several noble families stood and called the decision a betrayal of their civilization. Lucas sat quietly at the table, saying nothing. But Kalara stood up. "My father is wise," she said firmly. "This human has taught him more about strength than all of your wars and weapons ever could. If you cannot see the value in what he offers, you are not worthy of serving this empire." The nobles fell silent. The princess had just declared her complete support for Lucas, and in Zephyrian culture, that meant something powerful. The heir to the throne had chosen to stand beside the human rather than with her own people. That night, an assassination attempt was made on Lucas's life. Someone poisoned the wine meant for him during the dinner, but his sense of smell had detected the contamination before he drank it. He had simply set the cup aside without touching it. When guards brought him the man who had orchestrated the poisoning, Lucas looked at him and felt no anger. The man was afraid of change, afraid of a future he could not control. Afraid that a blind human might prove that the Zephyrian way of living was not the only way to be strong. "Let him go," Lucas said to Kaelara, who stood beside him with her hand on her weapon. "He tried to kill you," she said. Shocked, "Yes, but killing him will only create more enemies. He was trying to protect what he believed in. That is not evil. That is just fear." Lucas paused. "Fear is something I understand very well." Kaelara held his arm tightly. "You are a strange human, Lucas Hayes, but I am beginning to see why the universe sent you to us." By the end of that month, the Zephyrian High Council had voted to support the research program into human sensory techniques. The Emperor recovered some of his public confidence, and the whispers of his blindness slowly faded as his leadership proved stronger than ever. The Empire was beginning to change. And at the center of that change was one blind human who had taught an entire civilization that true sight was about much more than what your eyes could see. 3 months into the research program, Lucas made a discovery that would change the entire course of human history. Working with Zephyrian scientists in a military research facility, he noticed something remarkable about how the human brain adapted to blindness. When a human lost their sight, the brain did not simply accept the loss. It reorganized itself. It took the neural pathways that would have processed visual information and redirected them toward other senses. The hearing became sharper. The sense of spatial awareness became more precise. The ability to detect subtle vibrations in the air became almost superhuman. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Karan, the lead Zephyrian scientist, said while reviewing the data. "The human brain has incredible plasticity. It is almost like your species was designed to adapt to harsh conditions." Lucas nodded. "Earth is a death world. We survived because we could adapt to anything. If we lost our sight, we did not die. We learned to live differently. If we lost our hearing, we found other ways to sense danger. Every disaster that should have killed us made us stronger instead." He paused, then said something that would have serious consequences. "There is military application potential here. A trained blind soldier could navigate battlefields in complete darkness, could detect enemies through vibrations in the ground and air that sighted soldiers would never notice, could fight in conditions where Zephyrian technology would fail." The scientists looked at each other. They understood what he was suggesting. Here was a way to make humans not just useful allies, but genuinely valuable military assets. But Lucas did not finish with the military implications. Instead, he shifted the research in a completely different direction. "However," he said slowly, "I want to suggest we do not pursue that path. Instead, I want to teach Zephyrians to enhance their other senses, to develop the adaptability that humans possess, not as weapons, but as tools for survival when your vision fails. For when the genetic condition progresses further." Dr. Karen looked at him with something like respect. "You are suggesting we take the very knowledge that could make your species dominant and instead use it to help ours." "Yes," Lucas said simply, "because true strength is not about having the best weapons. It is about being able to survive anything." Lucas began training volunteers from the Zephyrian military and court. He taught them meditation techniques that helped them rely less on visual input. He showed them how to navigate obstacle courses in complete darkness. He demonstrated how to detect approaching people through vibrations in the ground, how to fight without being able to see, how to trust their other senses. Kaelara was his best student. She learned quickly and adapted faster than anyone else. But more than that, she began to understand something deeper about Lucas. Every technique he taught was based on compassion, on the idea that losing something did not have to mean losing everything. He was teaching her civilization that weakness could become strength, that limitation could breed innovation, that accepting human help was not surrender, it was evolution. Then, on a day that seemed like any other day. Alarms sounded throughout the palace. A massive fleet had appeared at the edge of the Zephyrian system. The Nith Armada, one of the most aggressive military forces in the galaxy, was approaching Zephyria Prime. They wanted the planet's resources, and would take them through force if necessary. Emperor Varesh immediately called a military council. The Zephyrian defense fleet mobilized, but there was a critical problem. The Nith ships were using advanced cloaking technology. The Zephyrian visual detection systems could barely track them. The military commanders reported that they could only see the ships when they were already within dangerous range. Lucas listened to the reports from outside the war room. He heard the fear in the officers' voices, the desperation in their tone. They were losing before the battle had even begun. He pushed into the war room and stood before the Emperor and the military leadership. "Let me try something," he said. The officers argued. They called him foolish. They said that a blind human had no place in their military strategy. But Kalara stepped forward. "Give him a chance," she said. "He has not been wrong yet." Lucas was placed in the command center at a station where he could hear all the audio feeds coming from the fleet. There was no visual display for him. Instead, he relied entirely on sound, the constant stream of data. The voices of pilots, the subtle sounds of the planet's sensor arrays as the Nith fleet approached. Lucas began to paint a picture of their location using only sound. He detected the vibrations of their ship's engines. He heard the slight distortion in radio waves caused by their cloaking fields. He felt the energy signatures through the palace's ancient sensors, picking up patterns that the Zephyrian visual systems had missed. 40 degrees north, 200 kilometers distant, 12 ships holding position, Lucas called out. 80 degrees south, closing distance, 8 ships attempting to flank our position. The Zephyrian pilots began firing based on his coordinates. Their weapons struck targets they could not even see. The Nith Armada suddenly realized they were facing an opponent who did not rely on the same visual systems they were designed to fool. The battle lasted 4 hours. By the end, the Nith fleet was in full retreat. The Zephyrian military had won a decisive victory using tactics and strategies that should not have worked. But they had worked because they had been designed by someone who did not see the world the way everyone else did. As the battle ended, and the Nith ships disappeared into deep space, the entire Zephyrian military stood silent. Then, slowly, they began to understand what had just happened. Their victory had not come from their advanced technology or their visual dominance. It had come from a blind human who had shown them that the universe was far larger than what anyone's sense could perceive. Kalara found Lucas after the battle ended. He was tired, his head aching from the intensity of concentration. She held his face in her hands. "You have a choice to make," she said quietly. "Stay here with me, help us rebuild this empire into something new, or return to Earth and be celebrated as a hero." Lucas smiled. "What do you want me to choose?" Kalara pulled him close. "I want you to choose me. Choose us. Choose to help us become a civilization that is not ashamed of needing help, that understands that strength comes in many forms, and that a blind human from a harsh planet could teach us more about survival than we ever learned in all our years of visual dominance." "Then that is what I choose," Lucas said. And in that moment, something fundamental shifted in the galactic balance of power. 6 months after the victory over the Nith Armada, the Zephyrian High Council met in formal session. The Emperor sat on his throne, his sight now noticeably dimmer than before. But his voice was strong and clear as he made his announcement. "I declare that Lucas Hayes, human of Earth, is now the Imperial Advisor of the Zephyrian Empire. He will have full authority in matters of military strategy, cultural adaptation, and technological integration. Furthermore, I am granting all humans within Zephyrian space full citizenship rights and equal standing before our law." The assembly erupted. Some nobles cheered. Others sat in stunned silence. A blind human had just been elevated to the highest position of power a non-royal could. Old Lucas stood in the observation gallery, Kaelara beside him. She squeezed his hand gently. "You deserve this," she whispered. But Lucas was already thinking about what came next. 3 weeks later, Kaelara was crowned empress. She stood in the coronation hall wearing the traditional robes of her position, and when the High Council asked her to make a proclamation, she did not speak about military strength or territorial expansion. Instead, she spoke about her husband. "When I married Lucas Hayes, I believed I was being punished," she said clearly. "I believed the blind human was unworthy of standing beside the heir to the Zephyrian throne. But I was wrong. This human has shown me that strength is not about what you can see. Strength is about understanding. Strength is about adaptation. Strength is about choosing to help others, even when you could destroy them instead." She paused, and her voice became softer. "I choose Lucas Hayes not because he is my political ally. I choose him because I love him. I choose him because he has taught me that a blind man can see more clearly than a civilization that relies entirely on vision. And I choose him because the empire I will lead is an empire built on new values. We are no longer a civilization that measures worth by what we possess. We are a civilization that measures it by who we are." The coronation ceremony lasted until sunset. By the time it ended, every person in the Zephyrian Empire knew that their new empress had married a human for love. Not politics, but something even more significant was happening. News of the Zephyrian victory over the Nith Armada had spread throughout the galaxy. Other alien civilizations were beginning to realize that the humans, the species they had always viewed as primitive and weak, possessed something valuable. Species started arriving at Zephyria Prime. They came to study human adaptation techniques. They came to learn about the sensory abilities of blind humans. They came because they were beginning to understand that humanity's greatest strength had never been in matching alien technology. It had always been in the capacity to survive, to adapt, and to find solutions that no other species would even consider. Lucas received delegations from 7 different alien civilizations. Each one wanted the same thing. They wanted to understand humanity. They wanted to know how a species from a harsh planet could produce individuals who could do the impossible. One day, Lucas was walking through the palace gardens with Kaelara when a group of Zephyrian children approached them. The oldest child, maybe 8 years old, did something that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. She took Lucas's hand. "Will you teach us to see like you?" she asked innocently. Lucas knelt down so his face was level with hers. "I do not see like you. We see in different ways. Would you like to learn how I see?" The child nodded eagerly, and Lucas spent the next hour with a group of young Zephyrians, teaching them to navigate a garden they could not see, to feel the textures of flowers with their hands, to listen to the sounds of insects and wind. One of them started to get frustrated when they walked into a small statue. "This is impossible," the child said. "No," Lucas said gently. "This is just different. Difficult things are worth learning. That is something humanity discovered long ago. Everything that seems impossible becomes simple if you practice long enough." That evening, Lucas stood on the balcony of the Imperial Palace with Kaelara. The Zephyrian capital stretched out before them in the darkness, filled with artificial lights that illuminated buildings and streets. To Lucas, the city was a symphony of sounds and vibrations. To Kaelara, it was still the visual landscape she had always known. "Do you ever regret it?" Kaelara asked. "Do you ever wish you could see all of this the way I do?" Lucas considered the question carefully. "I spent most of my life wishing I could see. I believed my blindness was a curse, something that had been done to me unjustly. But now I understand that losing my sight gave me something precious. It gave me the ability to see the world the way you are only now beginning to understand it. He turned toward her, toward the sound of her voice. I never needed to see the stars to know they were beautiful. I never needed to see your face to know you were intelligent and strong and kind. I could sense all of that through sound, through touch, through understanding. And that kind of sight is worth more than any eyes. Kalara took his hand and placed it on her cheek. I love you, Lucas Hayes, not because you are a blind human who can do impossible things, but because you are a man who understood that doing impossible things is just a matter of seeing the world differently than everyone else. Over the years that followed, the relationship between Earth and the Zephyrian Empire became one of the strongest alliances in the galaxy. The research program into human sensory adaptation became a standard part of Zephyrian education. Other species began to adopt similar programs, realizing that the key to survival was not in building better weapons or more advanced technology. It was in learning to adapt, to evolve, to find strength in apparent weakness. Historians later called it the adaptation revolution. It started with one blind human who married a Zephyrian princess and changed the way an entire galactic civilization understood strength. But Lucas never thought of himself as a revolutionary. He simply lived his life the way he always had, by listening carefully, by seeing with senses others had forgotten they possessed, by showing kindness even to those who had treated him with contempt, and in doing so, he proved the most fundamental truth that humanity had ever discovered. Strength is not measured by what you possess. Strength is measured by how you survive, how you help others, and how you face the darkness, knowing that it is not your enemy, it is your home. The blind man who married an alien princess did not change the galaxy because he could see better than anyone else. He changed it because he understood that true sight was about much more than eyes. It was about understanding the fundamental nature of survival itself, and in teaching that lesson to an entire empire, Lucas Hayes showed the galaxy what humanity had known all along. We are strongest not when we are at our best, but when we are at our worst and still choose to stand up, fight back, and help others do the same.